sleeper must awake.
So, what are those sounds that I'm making? What are those sounds, those noises that come out of my mouth? What are those very annoying sounds? Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, is the sound of my mind getting broken. Yep, that episode is kind of like a festival of sighs and squirms, and they're all coming from me, and I'm sorry about that. Well, actually, today's guest, Eric Wargo, Dr. Eric Wargo, is kind of to blame for those sounds a little. Because of his work. I mean, yeah. Precognition, retrocausation, already just that's especially that second term, that second word should trigger some questions in a lot of you guys. Yeah, and we used the term, the expression "mind-blowing" many times during that discussion, and believe me, it's not out of laziness for choosing the right words. It applies very well to the situation, especially for me. Well, I think Eric also went through some some mind-blowing of his own, but yeah, as I'm saying in the interview, I'm interested in all the science, all the data and the experiments and all that stuff. But mostly, I'm a really like hands-on kind of guy, and as soon as I started reading Eric's second book, about precognitive dreaming, I knew that it wouldn't be enough, and I would need to try it for myself to actually feel what he was referring to. And I'm not gonna go into too much detail here because I do in the interview. But yeah, it's kind of, my reality has been shaken, especially since I'm really interested in synchronicity, and I have been studying them in my own life, for years now. But that possibility that a lot of them, I think Eric maybe believes that all of synchronicities could be precognition. I'm not sure if I would agree with that, or at least some of them for me, like it doesn't really make sense to understand them through the lens of precognitive functioning. But for a lot of them, it does make sense. And this is pretty crazy. I'm just looking at all of the ones that are all the quote-unquote synchronicities that are happening in my life, looking back on some that have happened before, and I'm like re-examining them, and it's listen, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna read the bio that I concocted for Eric. I hope it's good. Here we go. So, Eric Wargo is a Washington, D.C. based science writer with a PhD in anthropology from Emory University. His professional journey includes collaborating with various organizations and government institutes, engaging in research spanning archaeology, psychology, and neuroscience. Additionally, Eric works as a science writer and editor. He is recognized for his acclaimed book, Time Loops, as well as for his most recent published effort, Precognitive Dreamwork and the Long Self. Dr. Wargo also writes about science fiction, consciousness, and parapsychology on his well-received blog, The Nightshirt. All right, so yeah, let's move on to the interview. As usual, like the video if you're on YouTube. Leave comments on whatever platform actually you're on. It always helps. And subscribe. Yeah, if you, I'm on Patreon. It's not yet very popular. That's okay. Everybody has them. But if you want to help the show without spending 1 cent, just subscribe on whatever, on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, whatever platform you're using. It really helps, putting the show forward. So, without further lollygagging, let's step into the mind-blowing world of precognition with Eric Wargo. Enjoy! Great. So the portal has opened. Hello, Eric Wargo.
Hello, Dominic.
It's so great to have you here today. We spoke a bit before starting recording. As I told you, I've been following your work for many years now. First time really digging into it. And especially experimentally. I mean, I'm a DIY guy. I like to try things. I learn more that way, you know. I can't say that I regret. For sure I don't. But my mind's blown right now. So thanks not only for being here, but for your very enlightening work.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to blow minds when I can.
Yeah. All right. So, well, of course, there's a lot about you out there. But maybe start with, because most people are going to come to hear you because they don't know me. So, but still, maybe present your work a bit, as hard as it can be. I know maybe you're just used to talk about it and it's easy. So,
well, let's see. I'm my academic backstory is I have a PhD in anthropology. I did not go into academia after I finished my PhD. Like a lot of people, I decided that world was not for me, and so I work as a science writer. And I live outside of Washington, D.C. currently. And for the past 10 years, pretty much more than 10 years now, I've been very interested in precognition, and there's a sort of paranormal backstory to why I got interested in that. But precognition is the purported psychic ability of seeing, knowing, or being influenced by things in the future events, future experiences. People very commonly experience what we call precognitive dreams, which are dreams that somehow play out in real life sometime, after the dream. But it manifests, people experience it in waking states all the time in meditation. Mm-hmm. You may have a flash image or a hypnagogic image that corresponds to something that's about to happen. People who hear voices or see visions readily may, experience precognition in that form. And my current work is on art and creativity and how it manifests
Mm-hmm.
for writers and artists. But it's controversial in the wider world of science and psychology because mainstream science still doesn't accept that there is such a thing as precognition. But decades and decades of research now, nearly a century actually of scientific research has amassed abundant evidence that it's
Mm-hmm.
real. We can talk a bit about that if you want to, some of the experimental
Sure.
evidence, but mountains and mountains of anecdotal evidence. Honestly, I'm
Mm-hmm.
even more persuaded. Even though I'm a social scientist, I should be only interested in scientific, experimental evidence. I'm honestly, the anecdotal evidence is more compelling to me and more rich in telling us what this ability is, how it works,
Yeah.
and how it manifests. And I think you need to sort of draw from, kind of scientific methodology and reasoning, but you need to also draw from, other tools that are more familiar in the humanities in
Mm-hmm.
studying precognition. So anyway, so I wrote a book, 6 years ago now, called Time Loops, which was sort of a first it was sort of a summation of the evidence, and including not only the evidence from parapsychology, but also the sort of emerging currents in physics and quantum biology that are starting to make sense of how this could really work, how this could be a real physical, biological process. I'm not interested. I'm not persuaded by ESP writers just hand waving about how it's about consciousness and
Yeah.
and whatnot. I mean, that's what writers have always done on this topic, and I don't think that's enough. I think that this is a real thing that will have a physical, psychological explanation,
Mm-hmm.
and we can start to do that. And so I lay out the sort of the possible physics behind it, and the possible biology behind it, um, and I also connect it to uh, what I think is really important, which is psychoanalytic theory. People sort of think of Freud as having been
Mm.
debunked or whatever. It's really not true. Freud remains
Mm-hmm.
incredibly relevant. And his theory of the unconscious, or what is sometimes called his metapsychology, that is, say, sort of that iceberg model of you have the conscious mind at the tip of the iceberg, but then you have all this stuff below the water, the unconscious with the id and the super ego, all that stuff. That, I argue, in Time Loops is a kind of ready-made model for understanding precognition. I
Mm-hmm.
like to say, just sort of turn that iceberg on its side and imagine the kind of x-axis of time, and that what we call the unconscious may be future cognition, future consciousness, sort of refluxing back in time, influencing us in the present moment,
Mm-hmm.
manifesting in dreams, artistic inspiration, and what have you. So that's kind of the argument of Time Loops. And then after I published Time Loops, honestly, art and creativity were my big interest, and I sort of had in mind
Mm-hmm.
like a big project studying how this manifests in creative people.
Yeah.
But whenever I presented on this, in podcasts like this, or in lectures and so on, people would always ask me about dreams because they would always bring their dreams to me, and I
Mm-hmm.
just got bombarded by emails and people telling me their dream experiences, and just wanting to understand the very common phenomenon of precognitive dreaming. So I kind of took a year off from my creativity project and wrote a book called Precognitive Dreamwork and the Long Self, which is sort of applying what we know or what we believe about precognition, how it works, to the study of dreams, and giving some practical guidance in how any ordinary dreamer can access precognition and experience precognition through keeping a dream journal and approaching their dream journal with in a certain way that looks for signs of precognitive information. So, but then after I got that out of the way, I returned to the creativity project. I'm about to publish my third book called From Nowhere, Artists, Writers, and the Precognitive Imagination. And it's all about precognitive art and literature, basically, and how precognition seems to work in the lives and careers of creative people. So, long answer to your question about.
That's a great answer. I mean, there's a lot that we can take out there. That's a great summary. I mean, that's a challenging question. You do a lot of stuff, and it's stuff that's sometimes hard to grasp for people, even people who are interested in that stuff. You know, we have all our preconceived ideas of how precognition works and what it can be used for, quote unquote.
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah, and because you mentioned, I usually don't go too much in the science, not because it doesn't interest me, but because there's a lot of people already who do that. But still, I mean, I think it's, and also maybe because, maybe you'll agree, I think you might agree with me on that point, because a lot of that stuff is not really adapted, if you want to call it that, to the settings of the lab, you know?
Right.
So, yeah. But it's still, I mean, not everything can be.
Well, it centers on emotions, you know, and things that are interesting, you know, and exciting and threatening and traumatic. And you know, those are exactly the things that a lab setting is designed to eliminate, you know, and even, you know, you can do little things to try and increase the engagement factor of a laboratory experiment. And in fact, some of the most interesting precognition research does that. And I can tell you about one really interesting study that sure. did make it interesting and showed why it's important. But yeah, I mean, this is true not just of psychic phenomena. It's true of anything. You know, I really think that experimental psychology is very limited in terms of what it can tell us about being human. And I say this as someone who worked for many years as an editor for a psychology organization, and my parents were scientific psychologists. I've come from that world, but I have come out of it with a real awareness of how its claims are overstated for being able to understand human behavior and human nature. Yeah. I'll tell you about that one experiment that I was thinking of. And this is actually one of the things that got me into studying precognition was, I told you I was, for many years, I was editorial director for a big psychology organization. And during that time, a very eminent scientific psychologist at Cornell University named Daryl Bem published the results of this big series of experiments he had run sort of in the first decade of the century with a large student pool of Cornell undergraduates. These were big experiments. Most experiments in parapsychology journals tend to be these little tiny experiments, and then you kind of understand why mainstream science doesn't pay attention to them. They just don't. There isn't the money, unfortunately, to run big experiments in parapsychology. But Daryl Bem was an exception. He ran these big experiments where what he did was he reversed stimulus and response, to reverse the temporal sequence of stimulus and response in some basic psychology paradigms, like priming studies and memory studies and stuff like that. And he got significant evidence of what we call presentiment. That is to say, sort of unconscious precognition, being influenced by something that's going to happen in the future, not consciously, but subconsciously or through our feelings. Presentiment means literally feeling before. And so his most famous finding, or his most famous experiment, was where he put students in front of a computer, and the computer screen would show two curtains. Okay. And they had to guess which curtain had a picture behind it. Okay. Now, theoretically, they should only be correct 50% of the time. And that was the case when the picture that was going to be revealed was boring. Okay, a boring picture, like a beach scene or something like that. But when the picture was erotic, okay, they scored higher than chance on these experiments, which, that's what I was talking about. They were keying in on some arousal in their immediate future. That is to say, after the mouse click. And this kind of blew minds. In fact, he even talked about this on the Colbert Report after the paper came out. But anyway, and I'll tell you another experiment he ran. He did a sort of standard memory word recall task with the participants, where he would show them a word list. Okay. Yep. And then typically in such a task, you would then have some sort of refresher or some sort of second thing and then test them at the end and see how that second thing influenced their test. But what he did was he showed the word list, tested them on the words, and then refreshed them on certain of the words. And guess what? They did better on recalling the words that they were refreshed after the test. Okay. So, mind blowing. And it went through peer review, but the editors of the journal, this was actually not my organization that was publishing this, but it came across my desk because my organization was thinking of publishing, writing a letter, this cannot, this is a travesty, this is, pseudoscience, this can't be real. The editors of the journal that he published it in, had a letter accompanying the article saying, we can't explain this. This goes against our beliefs, but it's passed. It's been peer reviewed. The methods look sound. Everything looks okay. It's our responsibility to publish this. And they were right. And, but that article really got me thinking about, what could this possibly mean? It's mind blowing. And at first he's like, no, it's impossible. Your immediate response to something like that is, no, that's impossible. How could that be? Well, it's not. So, yeah, I mean, I started doing my due diligence in reading the literature on precognition and then realizing, I was experiencing it myself. It's that you start to learn about this and you realize, you know what? I've had those dreams and I've swept them under the rug because, that was impossible. But no, it's real.
Yep, it is definitely real. Actually, because we had to move the time for the interview a bunch of times, and I gotta tell you, it's kind of a good thing. We were supposed to do this last week, and I don't even know where to start.
That's the way these stories always start. It's like this pause. I gotta tell you this thing that happened, and it's like,
yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna get into the specific story right now. Because I've also like it was at first a bit intimidating for me to interview you today, because I also listened to a lot of people, to you a lot on a lot of other shows, and like Jeffrey Mishlove, New Thinking Aloud, Aeon Byte with Miguel Connor, Rune Soup with Gordon White, and I mean they were so knowledgeable, and I'm not a scholar, like I'm a very slow reader. So I'm like, where am I? How can I manage not to get him bored out of his mind? So, but the thing is, I showed the book, your second book earlier. I got into it, and maybe I can start with that, and maybe you can comment on that or something.
Let me guess. Wait a minute. Let me guess. You had had a dream about something that you read in the book the next day.
Almost. Oops.
Because I've had that experience with this book. But go ahead.
Really? Okay.
I've had people, tell me like I had this dream, and then I opened your book, and the thing I dreamed about was what you had written in the book. I've had this experience specifically with this book.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, if you want to tell that story, but I'll just tell mine real quick because it's pretty quick. So I have like I said I told myself I would never say this on the show, but I'm kind of a walking synchronicity, and I'm gonna say it now. I'm born on July 7th, 77. So. Right. Like I'm at 7777,
Right. Yeah.
And I get I kind of get a feel for synchronicities and its language, and it's hard for me to put into words, but I think that over the years I've grown, to kind of understand more or less what it's about for myself, But nevertheless, the thing is, I kind of feel when a kind of a wave of synchronicity is going to happen. Yeah. And so just when I started your book, I was in the living room with my partner, and I told her right before starting reading it, I said, oh, we're going to have a wave of synchronicities. And she knows me. And she's, she lives with me. We share all those. So she's like, oh, okay. So I start reading, and she's just right there, probably reading too. And I'm reminded of a precognitive dream that I had. It's really quick. I had it when I was like 8 or 9, maybe, So it's right before I wake up. I dream of my dad calling me to the kitchen and telling me, get up and go get some milk. But then he gives me $20. That's in the 80s, $20. That's a lot. And he says, keep the change, So I'm like, whoa. So then I'm awakened by my dad calling me to the kitchen, telling me, go get some milk. And he reached inside his wallet, pulls out $2 and says, keep the change.
Right. Yeah.
So I tell her that little dream I had. And then I keep reading. And right when I'm done, I get to I should have noted the name of the person, but the guy who dreamt about winning lottery, but it was about the cousin or uncle, I can't remember exactly. Right. But so not to give to spoil the story, but
right in the introduction, yeah. I forget the guy's name. Exactly. He was in England, and he dreamt that his parents won the lottery, and kept calling them. What did you win? It's like, no, we didn't win the lottery. But then they told him, oh, his dad's cousin just won the lottery, and it matched, the details in his dream like really, really closely. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, because the money was in a bottle of milk.
Right. It was in a milk bottle. Yes, and the guy was a milkman or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So to me, like the notion of the money, and then it's in a bottle of milk, and my dream, it was like. So then I look at my girlfriend, I'm like, look, see,
there you go.
See?
There you go. So you told her the dream before, and then you read the story in my book. Is that
right
it?
Before?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. See, okay. So all right. So this is an interesting thing, and this is something we can talk about. And I make a lot of this, obviously, in both of my books. Is most people, the word that they have for describing these kinds of experiences is synchronicity. That's the term that people apply. And if they know, if they have any, most people don't know the word precognition. They don't come into this knowing the term precognition. They haven't thought about that as a possibility, but they do know this term synchronicity. And actually, there's a fascinating backstory to synchronicity and Carl Jung and why that concept became popular, especially over the past couple decades. But yeah, I would simply call that a precognitive experience, and it's fine to use the term synchronicity. It's fine, but I think that my argument that I make in my books is that the framework of precognition is more explanatory and kind of helps you understand what's going on psychologically and mentally in these experiences, and gives you some insight into how your thoughts, your very thought patterns, are kind of bent or shaped by things that are about to happen to you. And in this case, you're telling your partner this old dream. Why did you think to do that? Because of this experience that was coming down the pike, and you're obviously you say you have synchronicity storms all the time. That means you're a sensitive, intuitive person. You're, probably having, precognitive dreams all the time. You're probably, even if you don't know it, you are. And, and so, your thoughts, just on a daily basis are being bent by what's about to happen. And so understanding that, or thinking about it that way, thinking about yourself as a long self that's kind of snaking through time with these experiences that are coming down the pike. They already exist in the future, and they're influencing you now in some way.
Yeah.
That, it just gives you this kind of mind-blowing 4-dimensional view of the self. So, I love to kind of encourage people to translate this, idea of synchronicity into this idiom of precognition, because it kind of expands the dimensionality of the self. Carl Jung's term, I mean, he had a lot of reasons for framing and using that term synchronicity, because at the time when he wrote his famous writings on synchronicity in the early 50s, and he'd actually been thinking about this for like 3 decades, honestly, before he actually published on it, because it was he didn't know what to do with these experiences. But at the time, there was no concept of retrocausation in physics. That was like not a thing. And for him at that time, it just seemed completely implausible that an event in the future could in any way causally affect an event in the past. He had a mental block to that. And to be fair, everyone did. Freud did. He didn't believe in precognition. And most people didn't at that point, because there wasn't a concept, a plausibly physical concept of retrocausation. Well, that has changed. Physicists now or some physicists are now talking about retrocausation. It's actually all the equations that describe the physical world on a quantum level allow for retrocausation, and there's a sort of a growing interpretation of some of the biggest mysteries in quantum physics that says that those mysteries are because of retrocausation, that we've been looking at them wrong all these years. So, especially the issue of randomness and chance. And see, and so Jung was building his theory of synchronicity. The idea was to collapse the time dimension and make everything, and pretend everything is synchronous. There's a sort of, it all happens in this timeless, acausal world. Because he couldn't imagine a retrocausal link, but now I think we can do better and imagine the kind of 4-dimensional kind of structure of these experiences that are so common. I mean, they're incredibly common, and I try to get people to realize, if you're having synchronicities, it means you are experiencing precognition. You are experiencing your long self in all these experiences. But that's a great story.
Well, that's you mean
your story? Yeah, I mean that's awesome. Yeah,
I mean that's the crazy. We keep saying mind blowing, but it's hard to put words on it, and it's pretty accurate actually. It's your mind, your concept of time and how it works, like it's completely it's gone, so. And I mean, for sure, whenever I have quote unquote synchronicities, I'm gonna see them in a different way, and it makes total sense that even that little story that I told was more of precognition than because that's the thing, because we get the term, more about that than I do, but from what I know, the term synchronicity is a coincidence that has meaning. Okay, and so far so good. A meaningful coincidence. But as a person who's experienced a lot of them, that meaning part is kind of hard, to it's like, what does it mean exactly, So when you kind of and I over the years I've started to pull to take that idea out, the meaning part. It's not that it doesn't mean anything, it's significant, but you don't necessarily have a sense of meaning to, for example, I had a series, I'm not going to get into the details, but on one night I had a series of, I'm going to call them synchronicities for now, with roses. And what kind of drove me crazy was like, why roses? Like I like them, but I mean, they don't mean that much to me, So I started, considering the phenomenon from a different angle, and I mean, the angle you're suggesting is it's contributing to my thinking.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is the meaning's coming from you. You're the one giving the meaning, and the meaning is a product of that long self. So you can't ever know the answer, because there's still more of yourself there that you haven't gotten to yet, and that's revealing, that's continually revealing the meaning of these, or the significance, if you want to say, of these experiences. But one thing I'll say, and actually this is something that, if there's like maybe a couple things, if I were going to do a revised edition of my Dreamwork book, I would actually emphasize more, because I don't think it's really emphasized enough in the book. I sort of say it quickly and then I move on, but I think it needs more emphasis. Is that one of the things that magnetizes the precognitive mind is coincidence. That is to say, random coincidence. Okay, say you just because of the random chance in the universe, you encounter, a rose bush, and then you see a rose sticker on a car, and then you see, then you have lunch with a person named Rose, and it's like, they could be just totally, now to a Jungian, to Carl Jung, there may be an archetypal reason for that. I say, there doesn't need to be any higher meaning to that, but you're going to notice that because the brain craves coincidence. The brain craves things associating with each other. Okay, that's how our memory works. That's how our memory is structured, is through coincidences of one kind or another. And so we have a hunger for that. The brain has a hunger for that. And so when we experience even just a random coincidence, that's emotionally salient. That's like a reward. We actually get a dopamine burst from that. And our precognitive capacity is keying in on that. So we are unconsciously being drawn to situations where there are coincidences. And the fact that we were drawn to them, we don't realize that we're kind of being guided by this precognitive homing mechanism. But that adds to the uncanniness of these coincidences when they occur. So even let's just, the fact is there's, roses everywhere and we're just not noticing them. But, somehow, a rose bush and then a rose sticker and meeting a person named Rose, that'll, those occur close together in time. Yeah. Our precognitive brain is guiding us to those encounters, and then amplifying the significance or meaning of those encounters. And they don't have to have a higher meaning. I mean, they're part of our life. Our life is meaningful. Our biography is the most important thing, honestly. So that sense that the precognitive brain is a homing mechanism orienting us towards coincidence of various kinds, I think is really important. And again, I sort of mentioned that somewhere in the book, I know I have a sentence that the precognitive brain is a coincidence detector, but it's more important than that. I think that guiding us towards these experiences, these synchronistic experiences, is really an important factor there, because those whatever their meaning, they are meaningful, and people experience them as meaningful, and those meaningful experiences structure our lives, and they can be the basis for. I argue in the new book that they're the basis for religion. They're the basis for, they can be powerful motivators in any context. So,
But do you have an idea of why? Well, okay, I have kind of an idea. You can tell me what you think about it. Why it is actually that we would go towards those. Our brain would take us towards those experiences. And I'm saying the brain, but I'm not sure.
Right.
I'm not really big
mind,
on
brain, whatever.
Yeah. So it feels to me like there's some kind of a growth process going there, like in I wouldn't say nature. Let's say in wilderness. Okay, let's start with wilderness. Everything strives to grow all the time. Like trees will try to get bigger, and sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. Animals want to feed themselves and grow, and and so in the bigger picture, and in nature, we're part of it, and I think it feels like our consciousness is part of that too. So I'm wondering if, because I see how there's kind of a progress for my mind to be blown, okay? So it's kind of steps, incrementals, So my theory is that it's just consciousness tries to expand just as a tree tries to grow. So in increments, you can't pull on a tree, like it doesn't change anything, and it's going to break it if you pull on it. So because I won't get into too many details, but do you think it's just just kind of an our minds grow like as a part of a natural process? It sounds
Absolutely.
like a boring question. It sounds self-evident, but
well, I mean, the way you're phrasing it, consciousness expanding, I mean, you're putting it in sort of, metaphysical terms, which is great, but you could also translate that same idea into very kind of reductive psychology and say that we're learning. It's a learning process. And that's exactly what I was talking about, the brain or mind, brain, whatever you want to call it. We crave association and connect and coincidence. Coincidence is just kind of association, and the brain memory is formed on association. Coincidences of various kinds, or things that are linked, connection. And that's it's a very irrational kind of thing, but that's what structures our memory, and that's how we learn, by forming associations. So we move through life hungry to learn, hungry to remember our experience and learn from it and grow and move forward. And so you can call that expansion of consciousness if you want, or you can simply call it an organism moving through its environment and learning. So you could use a reductive term, or you can use the metaphysical term. It's the same thing. And that's what I'm talking about. We're, I sort of envision the long self as kind of a path through a landscape. And as we move down that landscape, we are constantly encountering interesting and important things that we need to remember and learn from. And we remember things when there's some sort of coincidence or connection that's irrational, illogical, but it helps hang these experiences onto our long-term memory architecture. And if one thing I really recommend people who are interested in this topic to learn about and read about is the medieval art of memory, because, or not just medieval, ancient art of memory, but the Greeks figured out how memory works, and neuroscientists are only coming around to understanding that they were right, that memory does not work like an Excel spreadsheet. I think psychology has for centuries kind of been mesmerized by this idea of filing things in sort of a bureaucratic kind of filing cabinet, Excel spreadsheet kind of way. But that's not the way an organic memory system works. An organic memory system works on illogical, irrational associations and coincidences, meaningless coincidences that help anchor experiences in memory. And so we're hungry. Our mind, brain, whatever, our consciousness is hungry for those experiences of things coming together, things kind of unexpectedly colliding or coming together. And that's what a synchronicity is. And that's what or a coincidence is. On a more general level, it's just how our automatic memory learning system is processing or digesting the world as we move through it. And precognition is orienting us to valuable experiential resources in our environment, that the watering holes or where we feed our hungry mind. Let's just call it mind.
I could use and maybe it would be inaccurate, but it feels like if you're driving a car or a bike or whatever, and you're looking forward and you see things that you're gonna like steer towards or away from, and things like that would be like a kind of a primitive form of precognition in a way. I don't know. So it kind of feels like if we go one step further, and I have an example of what I'm suggesting. It kind of feels like, okay, I'm going to speak for myself. Like all those experiences I've had since starting reading your book and stuff, it kind of feels like a new sense, like call it a sixth sense if you want, kind of developing. Like, oh, okay, I can not only see that further down the road there's a curve and I'll have to turn, but I also like I can see like in 10 years, but it's something like. So far we can't really do anything about, like, so that's kind of the problem. Right. And I know I don't want to get into free will now, maybe a bit later, but so the example I want to give, and you tell me if it's a good one. I know you're familiar with different remote viewing programs. So you probably know about Pat Price, who was considered one of the greatest. And so there's this story when he was given. I'm going to try to make it quick. He was given coordinates on a map. I think actually him and Ingo Swann were given the same coordinates, and they came up with like crazy description of like a secret military base with a lot of details and like something really big. And I don't know if you're familiar with that story.
It was an NSA facility that they both independently got.
Oh, NSA, yeah. And but then it happens that the guy who gave the coordinates for the experiment was like, well, that's not it at all. I gave you the coordinates for my cabin, but it happened that facility was near there, and then so they just focused on what was, for lack of a better term, energetically charged, like like in the what I guess could be called the imaginal field or something like that. And I remember Pat Price saying. That whatever's being hidden shines in the. I don't think
shines brightly in psychic space. Yeah, I know the quote.
Shines bright like a beacon.
Yeah, right.
So, I'm tempted to go towards that, like, but still we have precognitive experiences of very seemingly unimportant things too.
Well, yes, but, and there's an asterisk by that. This is a big topic in the Dreamwork book, as you know, having delved into it, is that famously people have precognitive dreams about really boring random things, and there are a few things to say about that. Number one, I think, and this is a hypothesis, and I don't think you could ever prove this, or at least not with present resources could you ever prove it. But I think that precognition is a very basic, constant process of the dreaming brain, for instance, and that we are really metabolizing or pre-metabolizing emotionally salient experiences, all experiences. And that's going to include some things that, like, well, why did I dream about that? Well, what you're forgetting is that you've forgotten, 99% of the dreams that you've had in the course of a night, but you happen to remember one. And, if you looked at what all those dreams, were, comparing them to the events in your day, well, maybe you happen to remember a dream about a big event the next day, but you may have happened to remember a dream about, a sink backing up at work. That's an example I use from my own dream journal. It's like a kind of minor thing, but honestly, sink backing up at work, that was kind of the biggest event in my morning. My life is boring. Like most of us, our lives, thank God, are pretty dull. So, the fact is, okay, it was a sink backing up. It wasn't a big deal, but I precognitively dreamed about it because there was nothing bigger happening. And so my hungry brain is fastening on that, objectively pretty trivial event, because that's what it evolved to do, is kind of metabolize our experience. And that includes, I mean, it was emotionally salient. It was like, oh my God, the sink's backed up. It was kind of a surprise, and it was a bit of a pain in the ass. That's what do you want? Thank goodness there wasn't a terror attack or something. The sort of annals of precognitive dreams, are dominated by these, dreams about plane crashes and terror attacks and 9/11 stuff like that. But thank goodness, our lives most of the time, especially if we're, privileged white people in North America, it's our lives are pretty dull. And so our, that's what are the kinds of things that our brains may be, focusing on. That's one part of the answer. I think there's another part though. When people notice these dreams about really boring kind of events, it never occurs to them to situate that event in the context of their larger day. And one thing that I've discovered both in my own dreams and in other people's dreams is that we often dream about very mundane, sometimes like just astonishingly mundane experiences that are like right adjacent to some big upheaval in our day. I'll give you an example. And this is one of those people who came up to me after a talk to share a dream experience. And unfortunately, I didn't get his name, and I didn't get any information. I wish I had, because it's a perfect example, and I use it a lot. I'll just say this guy, I'm not giving away any private details or anything here, but this guy was at a conference, and he and everyone he was with were evacuated from the building because there had been a bomb threat. And so it was a city he didn't really know. First, let me say, he had a dream, I think maybe a couple of weeks before, just very incredibly bland dream of just walking into this diner. Nothing interesting about it, just a diner, inside of a diner. That was the dream. Okay. Forgets the dream, of course. But then 2 weeks later, he's at this conference, and then everyone is evacuated from the building or the hotel or whatever because of a bomb threat. And the police outside say, just get like a few blocks away, please, so everyone sort of has to scatter. So he and the people he's with go off to find lunch. And they drive around a bit, and they find a restaurant, and they park, and they go in the door, and boom, it's the diner he had dreamed about. Okay. Well, so, you could say, well, that was why would he dream about the diner? I think sometimes people dream about moments of calm, rewarding moments of calm after something scary and threatening. And I've noticed this a lot in my own dreams as well. After talking to this guy about this dream, I've noticed the same kind of pattern in my own dreams as well, that sometimes, a very kind of randomly stupid thing that I dreamed about, actually, if you put it in the context of what was happening right beforehand or right afterwards, it makes some kind of sense. It's connected in some weird way to something interesting that was happening. And our memory is structured in very funny ways and in very irrational ways. But I think these moments that might seem meaningless and like, why would I dream about that? If you actually kind of put it in context and think about it, reflect on what was happening beforehand, what was happening after, you may get more a rationale that didn't seem obvious initially often emerges. So that's a second answer to the question. I don't even remember what the question was at this point, but
it's okay. I mean, it's just trying to figure out how this, like, why is it that we remember these future events, like why some, get our attention and some stick to our memory, our quote unquote normal memory, and
right. Well, I'll say, the irony of dreams is dreams are about forming new memories. I mean, that's actually a sort of a consensus that has formed in the last couple decades in neuroscience and psychology, that in one way or another, dreams are about making new long-term memories out of short-term memories. Okay. And it makes perfect sense to me. And I see precognition as simply a part of our memory, that our memory goes both directions. And at night, our brain is very rapidly fashioning these memory bundles but it's linking future experiences to those past experiences. So it's bundling them. It's bundling, future and past experiences together. It makes, it makes, I forget, I lost my train of thought there, but
memory, like, why do we remember specific things?
Okay. I remember what I was going to say. Cool. Irony of dreaming is that it's about making new memories, but it's very hard to remember dreams. Dreams like evaporate in the morning when you try to, and people often believe that they don't dream because they never remember their dreams. But in fact, we're all dreaming about 2.5 hours every night, having the vivid REM sleep dreams. We're dreaming in the deeper sleep stages as well. And we're dreaming all night, and we're having God knows how many dreams in the course of a night, but we're at best remembering, a teeny tiny fraction of them. So that, again, it goes back to this idea of, well, why do I dream about seemingly random things? Well, in fact, I think you're probably dreaming about everything, but you're only remembering a small sample of those things. And so it's going to seem haphazard why I dream about a sink backing up versus, a big event.
Yeah. Well, it brings us back, I think, to this idea that I used the term consciousness earlier. I kind of shouldn't have. I think awareness
There's nothing wrong with it.
Is a better term because consciousness is much more convoluted thing.
Controversial,
to say the least. But so just again, it feels like a sense, a new sense for me. It feels like that, like a new sense growing. And that's what I was going to say is, it feels, those experiences I've had in the last few weeks feel like they're not really about the events as much as it was about I have to experience them, So maybe it's a good. Actually, I remember we skipped on. You said you had a dream about the book or earlier.
No, readers of the book tell me they have dreams about something that they're about to read.
Okay, I thought you said you also had like some crazy experience.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. So. So maybe it's a good time to tell my own story that happened after
I want to hear it.
Reading. Okay, so I'm really bad at making this quick, but I'll try my best. I know people are here to hear you, so okay. So January 12th, I started reading your book, and I thought, actually probably a bit before that, but still, January 12th, I decide, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write my dreams and do those experiments that you suggest. So, in a nutshell, write them down when you wake up, just for people to know, and then look back if there's correlations, and also do some free association as you're writing them. So far, so good?
Yep.
All right. So but the problem I have, and I don't know if a lot of people have this same problem, I stopped writing my dreams down because they are extremely complex and detailed. So I would spend, I'm not kidding, like at least an hour. Sometimes I've spent like 3 hours. So I love doing that. I wish that was my life, but
yeah, I know.
So, but I'm gonna say I only needed one, and it was. Anyways, okay. So, January 12th, I have this. Actually, that's the day of the dream. I decide to record them on January 11. 12, I have the dream, which I told my partner. So I have a kind of a corroborating thing. So, okay, the dream is, I dream about two actresses, and because of their names and what they've been in, and they're related to Black and White. One of them is actually named White. That's her last name. So we're at this bar, like a milkshake bar, like a 50s milkshake. And this guy with like a paper hat, like, you know, like washing a super big glass. And so I go to her, to the white actress. She's actually white, but whatever. And I see she's drawing. She's making it like a pencil drawing. And I go to her and I say, I have projects to talk to you about. But before I get into that, let me give you some help with your drawing, because it's like a pencil drawing. It's all smudged up, you know, when you rub your hand on it. So I look at the drawing, and it's waves, kind of not waves in water, but more like sand, you know, like you see like in the desert, because of the wind, it forms waves. And between all the waves, there's characters there. I see Nietzsche in the center for some reason. And at the bottom left corner, there's a lot of people like that. I noted in big letters, peasants, because they felt like, you know, and we could see the faces like they were kind of deformed, like a Hieronymus Bosch painting, you know. So, but there's a tiny detail I forgot to mention. I told her. When I wrote down the thing about the projects I wanted to tell her about, I said, I'm going to talk to you about them later. And then in parentheses, I wrote projects, and then I wrote SIM, S-I-M. And I have no idea why I wrote that. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, and I thought maybe in French, like, what is that like a... Because my first language is French. So, okay. So then the dream switches to another, like a pizza place, but also like same aesthetics. And one of my best friends is there, and he's like holding a newspaper, and you see the newspaper headline very big. Okay, so that's the dream. I tell that to my girlfriend, and I move on with my life, but I get back to it once in a while. Okay. So, back in reality, a few months ago, me and my partner, we started watching the X-Files, like from the beginning. She had never seen an episode, so
Right.
so it's kind of our little ritual
Yeah.
that every day we watch an episode, or almost every day. And so on the 20th, on the 21st, we get to season 5, episode 5. And in the software I use to play the files, there is a description of the episode, and I see black and white. So I turn to her. Okay, if we see like a 50s diner,
Right.
like that's gonna be mad, you know?
Yeah.
So she's like, okay, we're gonna look for that. And maybe you even remember the episode, or if you
I
know them well.
don't. It's been forever since I haven't watched them since the
Okay.
90s. So yeah.
All right, I'm almost done, by the way. So, so of course, there's a scene in the show where there's like it happens in the diner, and then there's like this bar and this camera panning, like showing one person after the other. All people, like they kind of live in a small village. The episode is in a small village. So you kind of see those people with very peculiar faces, like that again, you know, like, and then also a lot of specific moments in the episode are of people holding papers with the title, you know.
Right.
So in itself, it's like, and even some of the details I didn't even think about them myself. It's my girlfriend who said, "Oh, have you noticed this?" Also, I'm like, "What the? Okay.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Like just trying to find ways on how it could be just me, you know." So I'm not 100% like, yeah, that's it. So okay, skip to the next day, next episode, episode 6, and the episode is centered around a family, just a dad and a couple and their adopted daughter. And the name of the family is the Sim family, SIM. So at that point, like for the life of me, I don't know why I wrote this word, you know, and it's specifically that.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
I had to stop, you know, the episode that time. I'm like, okay, life. What is life?
Yeah.
I made it as quick as possible. I hope it wasn't too boring for you.
No, yes, this is the kind of experience that you have when you start doing this. And often, like the first day or two, when you start doing this, you will record a dream that plays out, you know, but it's not exactly playing out. Like people, you know, you have to kind of understand that it's not going to be a literal, you know, video quality preview of some experience. It's going to be something like that, where it's, you know, and that's often a TV show, or for me, it's often something on Twitter. You know, that's kind of my daily ritual in the morning, is getting on Twitter and, like, you know, wasting a bunch of time on Twitter. And, you know, so a lot of my precognitive dreams are about things that I see or encounter on Twitter the next day. But TV shows, you know, this often happens. I had a very similar experience to you around the German television series Dark. Do you know that show?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. And it's about one thing, I say this in the book, things about time travel are like bait for your precognitive brain. Like they're somehow we key in on that, or at least if you're interested in this stuff, you key in on it. Yeah. And I had a dream. This was years and years ago. This was probably 10 years ago now. I won't go into details, but it was set in it had a very specific setting, which kind of, I thought, I kind of thought maybe it was Scandinavia, but it was this kind of forest, kind of this flat forest, and there was a big cut through in the forest, and a very specific scene involving like 4 helicopters and a few other things. Anyway, so years and years later, my wife and I started watching Dark, and it's, and right from the very first episode, set in Germany, in this town near a nuclear plant. Oh yeah, there was a kind of technical facility, kind of very modern facility set in this forest. Anyway, it's the setting from the very first episode. I go, oh, this reminds me of my dream so much. And there's this, and in every episode, there's a shot of this cut through in the forest where there's some power lines, very exactly like in my dream. And as I'm watching this show, it's just like I just kept thinking about that. And then the very last scene of the first season, the character, not to spoil anything, but character crawls out of, and I knew this was happening. It was like that feeling of, oh my god, this is happening. And the character crawls out, and it's in the future, and he looks up, and there's this futuristic quadcopter flying over the top, and it was just like, oh shit, this was the fulfillment of that dream that I'd had, not quite a decade earlier, but it was before there were quadcopters. I mean, it's like, and so in fact, in my dream, it was 4 helicopters carrying something, but it was the same idea of a kind of a big quadcopter flying over. Yeah. But yeah, it's just, and as it's happening, I'm just like, holy, it's like one thing to recognize that you've had a precognitive dream, but it's another thing to live it as the experience is happening and realize and be remembering your dream at the same time. It adds like multiple layers to this, and you will find that your amazement is folded into the dream. You're dreaming partly about, you will find that some of the elements in the dream are about your amazement that this is a precognitive dream. And that's, I talk about that actually in the book a bit. So yeah, this is a kind of, that was a beautiful example, what you described of the kind of just mind-blowing, kind of life-changing experience you can have, by paying attention to your dreams with the expectation or understanding that, yes, precognition is real, and you can experience it, and it's probably happening all the time, and you're just not aware of it.
Yeah. Wow. We're going to start wrapping up soon. So, oh, okay. I have a visit from a little guy here. Apparently he comes in every episode now.
I've got 2 black cats.
Oh, well, me too.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. So, where was I going to go? Oh, I have so many, I would keep you here for 4 hours, as most of, because, I mean, it's the kind of conversation I've always wanted to have. And anyways, well, okay. Maybe we could go because we don't have that much time left. But first of all, I'm happy that my experience has been Wargo approved. So
stamp of approval.
All right.
On it, yeah, definitely.
Can you send a little certificate or something?
Yeah.
I would gladly show that. Okay, so let me tell you a very, very quick dream, but it's for me it's super I don't know what to do with it, but maybe you do. So okay, so and it's a funny one. So one morning I dream of the Flintstones, Fred, and actually just Fred and how is he?
Is it Bernie?
Jeez, Barney.
Barney, yeah, right.
Barney, yeah. I remember them in French, but so in the dream, they have to save the city. Okay, that's what they're like, superheroes, and they have to save the city. And they get in a room where there's a huge screen on the wall. And for some reason, Barney's psychic, and he can project things on the screen. And he says, actually, Fred says, okay, we have to find a way to save the city. And then they think, and he says, oh, what about your ex, the cute redhead, and leaves it at that. And Barney's like, oh, yeah. So then he projects this image of the cute redhead on the screen, and they look at it for a little while. And then Fred says, okay, but we got to stop that. We got to save the city. So it was a joke in the dream. Like, but what's crazy to me about it is I woke up laughing, because I didn't know the punch. So to me, like, it doesn't really make sense, that, oh, it's just my brain generating this, because how can I tell myself of a joke that I generate also the punch of the joke, So why would it be funny, So
well, this is, this gets to the value of we talked about Freud at the beginning of the conversation, but I really recommend, not dismissing Sigmund Freud and psychoanalysis, because this is what it was all about. It was about the unconscious. What do you call it? The unconscious as this kind of this. It feels like. Now he envisioned it as this kind of submerged layer of thinking that we weren't somehow consciously aware of, which is paradoxical. But if you think of it as the way I suggest thinking of it, as kind of this future self speaking back to the present self, or this interaction between, versions of ourself at different points in our timeline. We are always going to experience that future self as other. We're going to experience it as coming from, it's somewhere else where, our thoughts in the future don't feel like thoughts we're having now. In fact, this is why precognitive information is so often interpreted in other ways, like as telepathy or as synchronicity or as some sort of broadcast from some, a lot of people nowadays engage with the UFO phenomenon and think that they're, that thoughts that seem to come from nowhere are somehow transmitted from non-human intelligences and so on. And mediums will interact with entities or intelligences that don't, they'll have thoughts that don't belong to them, so they attribute them to whatever. Not to dismiss those kinds of experiences or those interpretations, but I think a lot of those thoughts that we have that don't feel familiar, including that joke-telling, part of your subconscious in that dream, is us at different points in our timeline, including us in the future. And this is a lot of what my new forthcoming book, From Nowhere, is about. Classically, anyone who describes inspiration, they will describe ideas coming out of nowhere, out of the blue. And interestingly, there's a complete, that maps perfectly onto the way psychics report, like remote viewers. Ingo Swann, for instance, you mentioned earlier, he would, describe, engaging with those thoughts and images that don't feel like they don't feel like he created them, and so he interprets it as kind of like a TV signal from somewhere out in reality. I interpret those kinds of experiences as a connection to his future, where he's getting feedback and being told the reality of what was at that site or whatever. But that's a debate in the remote viewing community. But nevertheless, there's this way in which we can't. In fact, there's a term in psychology called source monitoring. It's how we know a thought belongs to us or a memory belongs to us, is we can sort of place it. I have a provenance for that thought. It comes from me, but there are kind of a spectrum of thoughts and experiences that for some people don't feel like they own them. And artists always describe this feeling of channeling ideas from somewhere else, someplace else. And of course, since Freud, it's been easy to say, well, that's the unconscious, well, what does that mean? But back in the day, it was the muses or the demon, or the Lord, or gods or whatever. Or spirits. There's all kinds of ways of understanding these ideas that come to us that don't feel like we own them, or that may feel like it's telling us a joke. This is so common with dreams. And Freud wrote a whole book about dreams and humor, or about the unconscious and jokes and humor. That the unconscious is very playful and it tells brilliant jokes. Dreams, are so just unbelievably witty sometimes. And it's like people. This is one thing that kind of dissuades people from even interpreting their dreams, because they just can't believe. I can't believe that my brain could have done that. I can't believe that my brain could have come up with this, this incredibly brilliant joke. I'm not that funny in daily life, but my dreaming mind can, just make up the most incredibly brilliant stuff. Well, I think that when we understand that our, mind, brain, whatever you want to call it, is four-dimensional, and our whole life is our whole experience over the course of our life is contributing to what's going on in our head right now. And some of it we can't recognize as ours because it's not from our past, and it's from our future. And so it feels like it's alien, or feels like it's, from nowhere, or from some other mind, or someone broadcasting an idea into my head. It's because it comes from our future. So that's my new book delves into this a lot. But the wit of that's one version of Freud's title, is wit and its relationship to the unconscious. This was a big interest of Freud's. It was, I think, maybe it was his third sort of major book after Interpretation of Dreams, but
okay.
Yeah. No, dream, look, even setting aside the whole question of precognition, engaging with your dreams is so rewarding. I kept a detailed dream journal. I did that thing where you're describing. I could spend like an hour, if I didn't have anything else to do, like on a weekend, I could spend an hour typing out, I used a word processor, typing out the dream in great detail and then interpreting it and stuff like that. You can spend, a lot of time on it. Most people don't have that kind of time, unfortunately. But it's enormously, long before I'd heard of precognition or realized that dreams were precognitive, or that my dreams were precognitive, just that engagement with the wit of the unconscious and the brilliant ideas that it generates is so rewarding. So, it's something that I always recommend people do. Even forget the psychic part, forget the precognitive part, just write your dreams down, or pay attention to your dreams at least. And, mine them for ideas, and use that dreaming brain in your creative work or whatever you're doing. It's so valuable.
Clearly, I can attest to that. I've experimented with, even if I don't write them all down, I've experimented a lot with my dreams, and especially trying to connect them with the waking reality, and not to, because we're at the end now, so I'm not going to get into it. But have you read Ursula Le Guin's The Word for World is Force?
No, I haven't read that one.
Okay, so I'm not gonna say read it, but
read it.
Anyways, because it shakes things around. I know it's a novel, but But anyway, so just when you said your next book is about creativity, I almost looked at all the questions I had and all the ideas I had, and I almost thought, you know what, screw that. We're getting into creativity, but maybe if
next
you're up
time
for
we
it,
can do another. Sure.
Yeah. When the book is, do you have an idea of when the book is?
I'm hoping May. I'm thinking maybe June, June, something like that. Cool. I'm hoping. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, for sure, I'm up for it. Discussing that, we didn't get into free will.
Good. Good. I'm happy.
Maybe have 5 minutes.
I'm happy
more.
not to go there.
Okay, no problem. We didn't get into Zen. I know you have a Zen practice. It's something I would have had many questions about. So anyways, a lot of stuff we didn't get to. Thank you so much, Eric. Where can people find your work? It's all the links are going to be in the show notes, but if you want to direct people to the most important things.
My 2 books are Time Loops and Precognitive Dreamwork and the Long Self. Those are available online wherever you buy your books online. And I have a blog which I have not added too much in the last couple of years. It's called the Nightshirt, but that has links to my blog posts and articles. Very linked. I've written for years on this stuff, and it's all kind of timeless. So I encourage people to go there. It has links to a lot of my podcast appearances, maybe not the most recent ones, but and I'm on Twitter. At the Nightshirt is my handle on Twitter. I don't tweet much, but I'm sort of present there, and I can be reached via direct message there.
All right. So people can tell you their dreams. A lot of people find that very annoying for some reason. So apparently you're not one of those people. All right. So if you don't mind staying with me, just to wrap up, but sure. Thanks again. And whenever you want to come back, I might reach out actually, especially after the book comes out. Yeah.
Sure, I'll be happy to.
All right. All right. Thanks, Eric. So you've made it to the end of this Hopscotch Chronicles podcast episode, and I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed doing it. And I thank you so much for your attention, and I hope you're benefiting in a way or another from this conversation. So if you'd like to follow my work, whether on this podcast or my personal work, you can go to Twitter or X and follow me at Domi_Valet, DOMI_Valet. Same username for Instagram, if you prefer that platform. You can also go to the official website for the podcast, which is hopscotchchronicles.com. And if you'd like to support the podcast as well as my personal work, you can do so by subscribing to my Patreon. The address is patreon.com/Dominic Valet, DOMINIC Valet, VALLEE. There you'll find video and audio versions of the episodes without any commercials, as well as special episodes on every Sunday where I take my Sunday afternoon tea with you guys. All right, thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep reaching for the light.